to help guide your PNC through their process. I've been on 2 PNCs in my short life, for better, for worse, and I chaired our last one, so that's a little bit of my history with the PNC search process. So I'm here to answer questions that your PNC may have, and hopefully I can answer some questions if there are any today.
You're also someone who probably will stay on after they have found their next pastor, most likely.
Potentially.
Yes. And someone who can kind of be a joiner to what the presbytery is up to, what this congregation is doing, and what will happen.
If so assigned.
If so assigned.
Thank
you.
Yeah.
PNC members, stand up again. There are some folks who don't know you yet, but if you would stand up, turn around, wave.
And
look,
Pam Bauer, who's
look
not
friendly, yeah. And Pam Bauer is not here today, but these are your PNC members. Thank you. Here's what we're going to do ever so briefly, and you'll make it as long as you would like with the questions that you might have. I'll answer some of your questions. Some of the questions might be answered by the PNC. Some of the questions might be answered by Tyler. But what you see before you is on the front page an overview of the pastoral transition process. We tried to break down for you all, since you haven't done this in over 10 years, who does what and who's responsible for what, and I'll go over that. And then on the back, you see a replica of these gorgeous boards. Look at them, aren't they beautiful? So eye-catching. But here's what will happen with these. We will continue to move those markers as we progress through the process. One of these will be in the narthex, one of these will be in the chapel. If you haven't been in worship in a while, or you haven't checked your email and looked at your newsletter, whatever the case may be, and you're wondering, where are we? What's next? What's happening? Come and look at the board. Come and talk to a PNC member. Come and talk to myself. Just an awareness of how we are moving through. Not every step, as you'll see and hear in just a little bit, takes the same amount of time. Not every step takes the same amount of effort. Not every step is predictable in terms of how long it will take. So while we're only right here, that doesn't mean that we won't be from here to here in a shorter amount of time than maybe it took from us to get from here to here. You know what I mean, so on and so forth. But let's look at the first side to talk a little bit about who does what. If you have questions that none of us can answer, which is entirely possible, please email there Brian Wallace. You heard him preach here a couple of weeks ago, but he is our branch person. Ask him the questions if you're wondering about somebody. The Commission on Ministry, I also serve on the Commission on Ministry, but Tyler is your person. Tyler's the person who gets to sit in the room with the PNC. I don't. They meet on their own so they can have their own level of process and confidentiality about their working on and what's next. And then also, we have the 7 members of the PNC, the 12 members that are on the back. Sometimes people have asked me, who's on session? Who's on the deacons? We try as often as we can to put it on the back of the bulletin, and when we update those things, we have a congregational meeting soon to let you know who your elected officers are. There you go. And you all, you 175 strong, you all are mightily involved in this process. The PNC, what do they do? What are they up to besides snacks and emailing each other, right? What are they doing? They are maintaining a high level of confidentiality. They have other people's responsibilities, calls, jobs, livelihood, their folks' families on the line. They have all of that information that they need to hold confidentially to themselves, not share with their partners, their spouses, or anybody else in their household, and certainly not with the rest of us. They work hard at doing that together. They meet frequently, often weekly. They don't always tell us when they're meeting. They could not. They might need emergency meetings. They might need special meetings. But they meet often, and they have been meeting often together. They are responsible to give updates not only to the session, but to the congregation. The way in which they do that could be skits, props, puppets, sign language. I don't know. They can give us an update in whatever way that they choose, but they are responsible for regularly updating us on where they are. And sometimes, unfortunately for the rest of us, it's a sentence. Sometimes there's no news to report. Sometimes it's, we're continuing on right now, and that's okay. But they will continue to give you updates whenever they have them, and especially whenever we change and move from one stage in the process to the next. You'll see the whole back sheet of what they're going through in the process, and we'll go over that in just a second. The session, they are responsible parties here as well. They're going to review and help create parts of the MDP. Those are the new words for the ministry discernment profile. Those are the new words for the myth, right? We used to call it the ministry information form, and now it's oh so important that we've changed it to the ministry discernment profile. So they're going to help fill that out. The PNC is responsible for creating that document, for filling that out. Almost 80% of it they're going to be working on. And then they send it to the session, because part of our process as Presbyterians and our polity demands that we do almost nothing unilaterally or on our own. They send that document to us and say, does that really reflect the kind of person we want to call next? Did they do a job that says, this is who we want to be, both in the present and aspirationally into the future? They check that with the session, and we say, yeah, that sounds like us, or that part needs a little bit more work. Please work on this a little bit further.
So, for those that aren't aware, the MDP is essentially the church's cover letter. The pastors that are in the search process will read this, their essay form answers, and say, this is a church that I see myself at, yes or no. So that's essentially the church's opportunity to present who you all are to the world.
We can go over that. It's also posted, and we can put it on the website, the kinds of things. The moment we have that done, we'll also share that with you all so that you'll know what's going to the national database and what's going around the country about who you are and who you're seeking next. It's the session that sets the financial capacity for salary and the call package. Moving forward, they'll work on those good things. The session helps to lead the PNC and the congregation through the mission and visioning process. That's what we're supposed to do with that salt and light sheet we just spent so much time on. The session is supposed to take that information and then do something with it as a response to what you all said. And they're supposed to be helping to answer the question, who is God calling us to be in this season? What do I do? What do I do? I help the session respond to the CAT scan results, which we just went over. I'm going to push the session in creating time and space for future visioning it together, and serves as a resource to the PNC and the congregation. You all are responsible for praying for everyone involved in this process, for paying attention to updates in the stages the PNC is working on, and to actively participate in any envisioning process that the session might decide that they're going to initiate together. Let's see if there are any questions about that side before we flip over to here are all the nitty-gritty pieces that the PNC and all of us are going to go through. Any questions on that part of it first? I know we all haven't done this in a while. I know all of you have been, most of you, Presbyterians forever. But is there anything about the process so far that I read on that side that you're wondering about? All right, let's do it. Let's flip over. This information used to be, for some reason, organized in a W-shaped form. You might remember that form where it had the little boxes and you moved up and down and it looked kind of like a Monopoly or a Candyland board. For some reason, we're no longer doing that. We're doing this. It's not, interesting, but at least it's straightforward. You can see it from top to bottom what we have to do. You all have already elected a PNC and conducted a mission study or other reflective work. That was the CAT scan. Check. The PNC begins meeting with initial orientation by the COM and branch minister. Tyler and Brian met with the PNC and went through an entire separately, 50 pages worth of things about the entire process and about all the forms they fill out and the things that they do and the interview questions they might want to ask, all of that kind of stuff. They've been working hard. Check. The PNC meets on a regular schedule with the COM liaison present frequently. They get to invite Tyler to their meetings whenever they want to, and Tyler can budge his way on into those meetings whenever he wants to, and kind of talk together about what they might need, what resources, and what's happening. But they're doing that now, even as we speak, and even last Sunday you met, right? Yeah, exactly. All right. The PNC prepares the ministry. Oh, look at that. I'm going to have to tell Brian he made a mistake. Prepares not the ministry information form, but the ministry discernment profile, or non and style of ministry posting form. That's what they're working on currently, and they hope to present as a draft to the session quite soon. And finally, he did get these acronyms right on the last one. The MDP is approved by the session. then goes to the COM liaison for Tyler to look at, and then also by Brian, so that it accurately reflects before it goes out to the world. Is this who you want? Does it feel like this is a good match in terms of the ways you've described yourselves of who you are now and what you want to be moving into the future? Any questions about that first phase there? There are no big surprises here. There's no big reveal. There's no fantastic information that's new and exciting that I'm about to say at the end of this checklist. We wanted to make sure that we took every opportunity, that the entire congregation was on the same page, had something to follow, had something to reassure them that we're moving through the steps. The work of discernment. This is the trickiest part of all. The trickiest part of all. The PNC receives and reviews personal discernment profiles. It's a whole new form that candidates like myself fill out. The ways in which we describe ourselves, the ways in which we describe our competencies, the ways in which we describe the parts of the job that we really love doing and the parts of the job we're not so good at, that we don't like to do as much. All of those kinds of things. Then they're going to identify candidates for initial interviews. They'll set up their own process for how they're going to do it. It's a whole new world than the last time you all did this. And so there's opportunities to not only know a lot more about candidates before you even get to narrowing it down to just a few, but to be able to hear them preach far and wide, to be able to know what they've written, what they've said publicly, what they've said on the streets, all of those kinds of things. Then they'll request executive reference checks from presbytery and contact references of candidates. So before anything feels like it is locked in, oh, we found our person, this is so great, we're going to go do all the due diligence and all the background checks and all of the things that everybody who's ever worked with them will say about these folks before we get even further serious. And then they'll conduct additional interviews, arrange for a neutral pulpit if desired, identify finalists to meet with a COM for a clearance interview. This is when the candidate has an opportunity to sit down with a couple of folks from the presbytery and say, the candidate, not with the PNC, just with presbytery folks, and say, here's what I've heard about them. Is that who they are? Here's what I've heard about their past and what they've been through. Is that true? Here's what I think that they're able to offer. Is that really their financial capacity? Because this would make life a lot easier for me. Here's how I feel about what it would be like to live in Pittsburgh. Would it be hospitable for my family and the people I bring with me? All of those kinds of things. They get to ask those questions. Finally, and lovingly, the PNC will extend a call and start to negotiate the terms therein. Any questions about that segment before we move on? Yeah, Layla. A neutral pulpit is something that we used to do all of the time, that because we didn't have everything online, groups of the PNC would travel to hear a pastor preach, and we'd bring them into this city if they lived somewhere else, or if they already lived in Pittsburgh, we'd arrange for another pulpit to be available. We'd call up Edgewood and say, hey, Edgewood, we think we really like this pastor. Could you let them preach at your church so that we don't share who they are yet with the congregation, but we want to see what they're like with real people in real time, right?
That also allows a pastor who may or may not have told their church that they're looking for another job, to not have a bunch of 7 strangers roll in on a Sunday.
No one wants that.
And have questions being asked.
Right? Why are you here? What are you doing? Not often do Presbyterian churches have 7 visitors all sitting together, quietly and lovely. It's a little odd, a little strange. So the PNC might decide that that's something that they need to do, depending on who the candidate is, depending on how much is already online about them, how much you can see on a live stream. As you all know, as you've looked at other churches, the live stream ability and capacity for every church and what they show about how pastors interact with the congregation varies from church to church widely. Some churches you get a real feel for how that pastor engages the congregation, and sometimes it's just one camera that just stays on their face the entire time, and you don't really get a sense of who they are, or they can't really move around. Any more questions about that section? Yeah, Martha. No, ma'am. Not in any way, shape, or form. Yeah. So ideally, they won't all say, hi, we won't be here on Sunday, all of us all together all at once, right? But you will get a sense of when they've moved down here, well, maybe that's where they are. Maybe they're not. You never know. And you all travel a lot as a congregation, or here and there and everywhere. So, yeah, but they won't announce that and say, we're going to Edgewood today to hear the neutral pulpit.
The last thing you want is for them to say that and then they have to say, no, we're going back 3 steps. That's not pleasant for anybody. And unfortunately, I had to do that, and that's not fun. So.
Other questions about this part? There are no dumb questions. When I expire? I hope I don't expire soon. Yeah. No. Yeah. In the next couple of months, the session will have to decide, as they pair that with the PNC, what's the best leadership for you all moving forward, whether they want to extend that, whether that's where I am in my call process. But the session makes that decision. My contract is currently up at the end of July. So sooner than later, we'll be having that conversation about how do we pair that timeline of what the PNC is going through, how the search is going, and what's best for the congregation.
I think it's fair to say generally it's not like 2 weeks notice for a pastor.
It's not 2 weeks notice.
Like it's a month or 2 months or
Right.
So there's some wiggle room.
Yeah. My contract currently says it's a month's notice. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I can describe it. Would you rather?
It's up to you.
Can you use the microphone? Yep, we'll repeat the question.
So the question was, and correct me if I'm wrong, is this a nationwide search or is it local? How do applicants come in? So once the MDP goes online, it goes online to the Church Leadership Connection, I think is the second C, which is a nationwide Presbyterian portal. And it, for lack of a better word, it acts like a Match.com or an eHarmony, where the PNC will get suggested matches, right? So they'll have 150 candidates right off the bat, or whatever the number is. And they'll determine, is it worth looking at these people? And then there will also be applicants who specifically look for Sixth Presbyterian Church and say, I want to apply, and they will either apply through the portal or they will email the PNC or do both. So it by no means is regional. You'll get applicants who say they want to work in Pittsburgh, but really that means Erie or Wilkes-Barre or Philly, and they have no interest in Pittsburgh. But it is a national search as much or as little as you would like it to be.
Does that answer that question, Elliot? Okay. You might be wondering, will the PNC share with us how many applications they got? They can share that data. They won't share maybe how many they narrowed it down to. They won't share if they love the batch or they hated the batch or they have to start from scratch. They can share with you, because it's just sheer numbers from the database, how many were referred automatically and matched, how many self-referred, meaning if I don't want to tell my friends, neighbors, and colleagues that I'm really interested in Sixth, I can go ahead and just say, Sixth, I'm interested in this position, but I'm not searching nationally and not open to other things. So you can also self-refer in a way that people would send in a regular job application for other parts of our world. You all will get, without a doubt, unlike other congregations, again, this is how you're unlike other congregations, especially in this presbytery, you will get, the PNC will receive so many profiles to look at. So very many. You are not only a unique congregation, but given where you're located and given the city that we live in, there will be no shortage of folks. It'll be a difficult job then on the other end. Rather than trying to find candidates to interview, how many will the PNC interview? How will they narrow it down? That's the hard work of discernment that they'll have to be up to, because there will be so many folks, my colleagues, who will be interested here.
Who is right for Sixth versus who just wants to say they're at Sixth?
Yes, lots of people want to be here. Lots of people would love to be in this pulpit. Who's the right match for what you need to be and do next? That's the tricky part of the conversation. Other questions about that piece? Then we get to the wrapping up, right? They will tell us, the PNC, when they're getting closer and closer, when they've extended the call, they'll give information to myself and to the session about where they are in that process, and then things will start moving quite quickly. The candidate and terms presented to the session for approval. If an installed position, a congregational meeting is scheduled, so that person will come preach for you all, help to lead worship, and then you'll hold a congregational meeting where you'll vote on that. Not only on the candidate, but also on the terms of call. You'll have a first Sunday and a meet and greet. The PNC's job is not done until they're officially dismissed by you all. They are elected to get the new person here, all the way here, settled in, and then we can dissolve them, so to speak. And then the pastor begins. And again, I know that you have a history of sometimes that person can begin right away because they're able to move that fast or jump that quickly, or sometimes they're not in a call, but they're ready and able to be here and that timeline is quick. Sometimes they say, look, I can't leave the congregation I'm currently serving. It's 5 weeks before Christmas. Give me until, January until I could start, or things like that. There might be a bit of a gap as we get ready for me leaving, or whoever you all have serving you all after the end of July, and the next person coming. There'll be a little bit of a gap in between of time where you will hear some pulpit supply, and then your next installed pastor will start. Questions? PNC, is there something you'd like to say that was left out, or something that we forgot to offer? Kit is saying underscore the pray for us part. Yeah. I see these folks as working well together. I think the nominating committee did a great job of putting these personalities together, that they represent you all far and wide and in different ways. But all of the work that they are doing on your behalf is immense. Anything else? Yeah, April. Mm-hmm. That's a really good question. Some interim pastors don't lead a mission and visioning process, so they don't do it at all in between. I'll be pushing the session to figure out what it is that we want to be up to in the meantime. It doesn't have to be completed and coincide with anything that the PNC is doing. Ideally, we will take some of the things, since we asked for your all opinion, and we will take some of those things and do something with it and make it ongoing. But doing it in such a way that I respect the fact that it's not mine that I'll be carrying through, right? It's something that I'm going to hand off to the next pastor and say, here's where we are in process with working on this goal. Those kinds of things. Other questions? Comments? I'm going to put this down, and then why don't I pray for all of these folks? Let's pray together. Gracious God, we give you thanks for all of the ways that you communicate with us. We give you thanks for the ways that we try to communicate clearly and effectively with one another. Help us calm our anxiety, help us ease our nerves as we move into the next phase of searching. We pray for the person who is about to come, for who they are, for their family, or how this will affect them and how they will be molded by this community of faith. I give you thanks for the PNC, for the COM, and for all of those folks who help make this possible, and all the work and sacrifice and time that is given on behalf. God, we look forward to seeing what it is that you have for us on the horizon. And all God's people said, Amen. Go in peace. Or jot down questions, or hand me a question you didn't want to ask in front of everybody else. You doing okay? All right, good.